I accidentally ruined a pregnancy announcement for complete strangers, then months later was told I was responsible for their best story of their life. What are your most awkward stories turned awesome? Story 1. I recently finished a humanities class, which is basically just community service. We have monthly meetings, and last month I was asked to be the keynote speaker at our end-of-year banquet. I'm not a very confident public speaker, and I tend to get the shakes, but I figured I would have no problem giving a speech to 50 or so of my peers, so I accepted the honor, not quite realizing what I had gotten myself into. I wrote a short speech a few weeks in advance and showed up half hour before the actual ceremony began. During socializing hour, I realized immediately that I had made an enormous mistake. The hall was packed with more than 400 students, parents, and staff. Even the college president was in attendance. And to make things worse, I hadn't gotten the memo that it was a formal event. I was wearing jeans, slides, and the obnoxiously bright orange shirt that they had handed out to all the seniors in the class. I went weak-kneed as soon as I walked in the door. With 15 minutes until the start of the ceremony, I took off to the local Walmart to buy a shirt and a razor. I proceeded to shave in the Walmart restroom with the limp-ass faucets that only dribble out a couple of teaspoons of water at a time. It took me nearly 10 minutes to eradicate my neckbeard, and by the time I showed up, the ceremony had already begun. I walked on stage with a glass of water and a razor-burnt face to recount my most recent dilemma as my icebreaker. The room burst into side-splitting laughter, and I was able to walk off the stage with my dignity mostly intact, at least. Story 2. I caught my mom cheating on my dad. I knew this girl online, and it turned out my mom met her dad online and went to see him. Somehow, the girl put 2 and 2 together and messaged me that my mom was there. I realized my mom had been gone for days, not at her aunt's funeral, but with another man. She was always a drama queen and a mean-spirited one at that. My mom comes online after I demand to talk to her and tells me that my dad knows. It turned out their marriage was failing and he wanted her to see if someone else could make her happy, so he supported her decision to find someone new. I go to my dad in tears and ask if they're getting a divorce. He hugs me and says they probably are. My dad is 6'5" or so and about 350 pounds. He was in his tidy whities at the time and suddenly breaks into a dance to the beat of The Heat Is On by Glenn Frey singing, "The witch is gone, the witch is gone." The sight of it was so hilarious to me that I just started laughing through my tears. To this day, whenever I think of my parents' divorce, I think of this somehow funny moment when my dad was being a big, goofy, dancing guy around in his underwear singing his parody of The Heat Is On. Story 3. A woman I work with had just had a baby and asked me to be the baby's first babysitter. We're pretty tight, which I had no problem with considering I'm like the Pied Piper with kids, minus the leading into a cave, of course. So I'm babysitting an infant and an 8-year-old. No problem. I got this. I put them to bed and decided to watch Archer on Netflix. Still good. Then I heard something in the backyard. Being a strong, black-belted, independent woman, I decided to go survey the premises. So I go outside and realize it's just the apartment complex behind them. No big deal. I go back to watch Archer, but oh no, the door's locked. In a blind panic, I run back and forth between the front and back doors, attempting to open clearly locked barriers while vaulting their 6-foot fences. Around the third lap of freaking out, I discover there's a gate and decide to call the parents who are out for their first date since the baby was born. Fully out of breath, I try one more bright idea of banging on the 8-year-old's window to wake her up, but to no avail, and the neighbor's dog goes insane. End of the story, the parents think it's hilarious and still bring me up crying, sweating, and freaking out over being a negligent baby watcher on their front porch. Also, the 8-year-old may be traumatized by a night when a stranger banged on her window late at night. Who knows? Story 4. So me and some guys met some girls on vacation and hung out with them until 2 days later when they ditched us for another group of guys because they had grass. We were generally annoyed. Fast forward a couple of days, we're sitting by a campfire in town when another completely different group of guys we have never seen before randomly sits by the fire with us. We all just mind our own business because it was a public fire by a restaurant and we figured they just wanted to stay warm. About 5 minutes later, we started a conversation with them. It turns out that they are the brothers of the girls that we met, and the girls we met lied about their age to us. They told us they were 18, but they were actually 14 years old. We tell the brothers that their sisters ditched us for grass. The brothers are pissed that their 14-year-old sisters are smoking with some other guys. We all decide to leave the fire together and go to Starbucks. Then, bam, there we see the girls leaned up against a wall talking to the guys. All of us proceed past the guys and whisper in their ears, "They're 14 years old." The look on their faces, I will never forget it. One of the most glorious moments of my entire life. Breckenridge, Colorado, no better place. Story 5. The second weekend at my giant college in the city as a freshman was incredibly daunting. It was really hard to find friends, and even if you did click with someone in one of the stupid orientation events, our school is so huge that unless you go balls out with a socially successful penguin and ask them to go to a movie or something with you 15 minutes after meeting them, you'll probably never see them again. So thankfully, I'm in a class with a girl that I get along with well enough, and late in the week she asks if I want to come to a party at a bar that had been rented out with her that weekend. I'm thankful to finally have been asked to do something with the prospect of making a real friend, and I'm super excited about it. Sounds so lame now, but this college really is huge and I was so overwhelmed. Fast forward to Friday, I meet her at this bar, we have a great night, and we make some real friends headway. Suddenly, it's 3 a.m. and we decide to go home. My dorm is across the city via a really sketchy walk, and being the terrified freshmen that we were, neither of us thought it was a good idea for me to make that walk home alone. My new friend offers to let me stay in her dorm. Her suite mate is out for the weekend, so I have a bed to sleep in. So we get back to her dorm, drunk and tired, and lo and behold, her crazy suite mate has not only locked the door to her room, but zip-tied the doorknob. It's a college dorm, so there's no couch. My new friend awkwardly asks if I want to sleep in her tiny college twin bed with her. Keep in mind, we've had at most 4 conversations prior to this night, and I can tell she's hesitant to ask, but also doesn't want to kick me out. I'm unfamiliar with the subway and don't want to walk back alone, so I agree and we spend the entire night spooning in a tiny twin bed. I wake up the next morning to her roommate, who had barely conversed with her at this point, giving us extremely quizzical glances. 4 years later and about to graduate, we're still living together and she's become my best friend from college. I guess it's good. Otherwise, it would have made for a few weird exchanges in the hallway. And the roommate has also become a great friend too. Story 6. About 5 years ago, my very good family friend was getting married to her longtime boyfriend, and she asked me to be a bridesmaid. One day, we went bridesmaid dress shopping together and then met her boyfriend and his parents for dinner. His mom asked me what we had been up to all day, and I said, "Oh, just looking at bridesmaids' dresses." She just gave me this blank, "What?" look. Apparently, this was the dinner when they were going to tell his parents about the engagement. We still laugh about it. Story 7. I was working out of town for the summer when my sister flew into a nearby city for her cousin-in-law's wedding. Since the only time I had to visit with her was right after work, on the night of the event, she and I agreed to meet out in the parking lot, hang out for a little bit, and then go on our ways. Once I arrived, she insisted I come inside, sit down at a table, and get something to drink. I blanched at the idea, considering I was in my paint and sawdust-covered stage carpentry clothes. She insisted it would be fine and pointed out a few of the most casually attired wedding guests to put me at ease. We are not 5 feet into the reception hall when I hear this squeal of delight. "Wedding crasher!" cheered the bridge. She bounced up to us and said, "OMG, I have a real wedding crasher." It was about then that I remembered the Wedding Crashers movie had been released a few short months before. Obviously, she knew I was my sister's twin, what with the resemblance and all, and she was fine with my coming in. The fact I quote-unquote crashed her wedding was just the icing on the cake. So now there are photos in the official wedding album of me and the bride, me and the new couple, my sister and I with the bride, and so on. And every time they see us, I am joyfully greeted. It's an honor to be their official wedding crasher, but I am still mortified that I let my sister talk me into walking into their wedding wearing a Say No to Drugs t-shirt and cut-off jeans. Story 8. Me and my buddy Kurt had just graduated from high school. We were in a free mood, and in the middle of a weekday, we decided that, screw it, we were going to go eat out. We drove 30 minutes into Bowie, MD. He lived in Laurel. He drove. We just drove down Route 197 until we hit an Outback Steakhouse and stopped and ate there. I had a burger, medium. He had a burger, medium rare. He ate all but 2 bites before packing it up to go. He was still a fitness nut back then. As we were leaving, he saw a comic shop and we went in to browse. It was chilly inside, but nonetheless, I looked over at him a few minutes later and sweat was forming on his brow. "You all right, bro? You're sweating." He stops and thinks, "I think I had to go take a poo." We leave. He's driving a stick shift at the time, this old beat-up junk heap with 200,000 miles on it. As soon as we were on the road, I could see him struggling to hold it in, and we had a 30-minute drive ahead of us. I started to laugh, and then he says, "You shut the hell up. Don't you make me laugh." He commands in a zombie survival tone of voice, and that just makes me laugh even harder. He had to go so bad that laughing would blow the O-ring. So sweat began to pour down his face, and I laughed harder still. I do this awful wheeze whenever I laugh hard and get lightheaded. I had to look away because every time I looked at the gun against head intensity in his eyes, I lost my mind and he yelled at me to shut the hell up. At one point, he admonishes me not to even smile at him. We're 2 minutes away from his house at this point. We're going 25 over the limit and my bud is growling. He literally sounds like a rabid dog and I was dying silently inside in my shirt sleeve. You know how when you have to go really bad and you're close to home, the anticipation relaxes you and you have to go even worse? Yeah, that happens. The growls choke off and I dare to take a peek. Every muscle in his body is rigid, lending strength to his completely taxed self. He can barely shift gears. His shirt is drenched in sweat. He may as well have been in the middle of a forced Russian roulette in Vietnam. Tears are already rolling down my face from laughing, but that makes me wheeze so hard I choke up some phlegm, and then I see it. The muscles at the corner of his mouth crack into a smile. He wanted so badly to share in the mirth. This lasted maybe half a second, but then the half smile disappeared. His eyes went wide and instantly turned bloodshot, and it was on. He careens at probably 45 miles per hour off into the side road immediately in front of us and parks that thing right in the middle, diagonally, like a friggin' night rider. He's probably out of the car before it completely stops, and he runs across the front of the car towards the woods on our right. His pants and boxers are gone like he was a paid magician. He makes it as far as the middle of the sidewalk and lets loose. It looks like someone cracked open a fire hydrant. We're talking like ocean spray in here. I almost passed out from laughing so hard, and Kurt has a look on his face like he's passing a kidney stone, and he's screaming in the same manner. But not only did he not make it to the woods, not only did he completely paint a whole sidewalk block with diarrhea, but 30 feet behind us was the busy street we careened off of, cars passing by in full view. And not only that, but 50 feet in front of us was an elementary school, and school was in session. Kurt couldn't even find his boxers again. He just put his pants back on, and we both exhaustedly arrive at his house a mere minute and a half later. As we walk in the door, his mom is in the family room to the left holding a PTA meeting. Completely unfazed, Kurt mumbles to the room, "Just shat myself, going upstairs, Dennis will fill you in." He immediately hits the stairs and leaves me explaining to the PTA how Kurt just shat on public elementary school property in full view of children and passing vehicles. The most awkward ending ever, and the whole ordeal was a little awkward, but the story has been polished into something beautiful over the past decade, and it always gets the most laughs at parties and the like. Story 9. Good timing. I just remember this story. When I was about 8, my family and I went to a baseball game for the home team, and we got into the fancy club or whatever. I think it was like the 720 Club or something like that. Anyway, there was a buffet in there, so we all got food when a huge mob of men in suits walked in. My dad shuffled over so quickly that I thought the floor might shoot sparks. Immediately, he bent down and told my 2 older brothers and me to be on our best behavior because former President Jimmy Carter had walked into the room. He was a top graduate of West Point and worked for Homeland Security, so he was able to talk to Mr. Carter for a few moments. After we got our food and sat down, he walked over with all of his bodyguards to say hello to all of us. We all politely stood up and greeted him one by one. My oldest brother walked up to him confidently, held out his hand and said, "Good afternoon, Mr. President." They shook hands and he went to stand next to my dad. I walked over with my mom and said, "Hello, Mr. President," while struggling to make eye contact, then proceeded to hide behind my mom. I was, and still am, very shy. At this point, my dad's face split with a massive grin because of the pride he felt for his well-behaved children. And then in walked the middle child. He sauntered up, stuck out his hand, and with the goofiest smile and loudest voice, my brother shouted, "Hey, Jimmy!" And my father's face turned from pure joy to utter horror in the blink of an eye. He could not believe that had just come out of his mouth. Mr. Carter, along with the rest of his guards, were laughing now, and my dad looked so humiliated that I thought he might actually cry. The president simply took my brother's hand, shook it, and said, "How you doing, son?" He then patted my dad on the back and said, "You did a fine job raising your family." After that, he walked over to his table with his guards and ate his meal. Story 10. I was spending the 4th of July, 2009 in the little condo in Steamboat Springs, Colorado with some good friends. Everything about the weekend was shaping up perfectly. Some other people who paid backed out, so everyone got their own bed, and we had more than ample amounts of alcohol and food. The first night that we were there, we started playing Circle of Death, King's Cup, Never Have I Ever. We made up our own rules as we always did. One of the cards said, "When was the last time?" I happened to draw the card and say, "When was the last time you had sex?" Obviously, to brag about the sex I had that morning with this girl I had been seeing. I started, and the answers went clockwise. The girl sitting to my right said May. Next up was her boyfriend, who took a long pause, looked right at her, and said February. The awkwardness filled the room immediately. Everyone finished their answers haphazardly, and he stood up, walked down the hall, and closed the door to their bedroom for the weekend. She eventually followed. We proceeded to make road drinks and walk up the mountain while the two figured it out. The rest of the weekend was sort of tough and awkward, but now, 18 months later, they are one of the happiest couples I know. Story 11. This is actually about my sister-in-law. Before you read, yes, we are lesbians. My girlfriend apparently went and bought an engagement ring for me and told her mom about it while they were out to lunch or something one day. Her mother seemed to think she had already proposed, even though my girl never said anything of the sort to her. A few days or weeks later, I get an email from her sister-in-law. I just heard the amazing news. We are thrilled for you two. Yay! I was chatting with a friend at work and sent her a message saying, "What the F is this crazy talking about?" She called my girlfriend and gave her the heads up. Later that day, I called my girlfriend and asked her. She played it off and made up an excuse about something she may have been overexcited about. I never gave it a second thought. 2 weeks later, she proposed to me. Damn good thing I am oblivious. The next time I saw my sister-in-law, she was super apologetic and was almost in tears because she thought she had ruined the surprise. We are now engaged and hoping to get legally married on our 10th anniversary. Here is a proposal story. She was freaked out. I was going to find the ring reaching in her purse because I was looking for her phone, gum, or whatever. We were at a bar in the afternoon, and we walked down the dock to sit and look in at the water. She apparently had the ring in her hand, and it started sprinkling rain. I said, "Crap, it's raining. Let's go back." We sat back down with our drinks, and she just handed it to me. She told me she wanted to be with me forever, and she did start crying. She never does. Then she called me a freak for leaving the dock because it was sprinkling. She still loves me, though. Story 12. One time, my friend's grandma died, so we all wore black and tried to look super fancy because we were preteens. After the funeral, we went out to dinner at one of those chain restaurants because nothing pairs with crying quite like wordplay-themed appetizers. While we were sitting there, our server came up, bursting with flair and bouncing everywhere and so ready to tell us about the specials that he was just going to explode with compliments. He said, "So girls, you look super nice. You must be headed to a fun time. You're all dressed up. Got a big date? Big dance? Love it. Love dancing. You all look souped up for a big night. Where's your date? Going solo? Cute. So cute. Tell me about your big plans." And here we were, a bunch of awkwardly dressed up preteens, and he was like 20-something. And I bet he thought we thought he was so cute and charming. And my mom was probably going to give him a monster tip, but I was 13 and I hated everybody, so of course, I had to be the one that looked at him straight in the eyes in the most deadpan voice I had and said, "No, we just came from a funeral. Her grandma died." His face dropped so quickly that it was actually painful to watch. It was the most awkward moment I had ever created to date, and I am an awkward situation maestro. Never before had I witnessed someone actually stumble over their words out of sheer embarrassment. He was so flustered he couldn't get out more than a couple grumbles that sounded a little bit like sorry, but more like, "Oh, I'm just sorry." And then he just turned around and fled. Afterwards, we giggled like the horrible little creatures that we were as 13-year-old girls, but it was awkward for that guy. Poor waiter. Also, our food was free, so that was awesome. Hell yeah, potato skins. Story 13. When I was 10, I played co-ed soccer and collided with a girl, breaking her arm in an accident. She had a piano duet the next week. I felt horrible. It turned out that her parent had also broken her other arm, and they ended up playing their recital together on the same bench. Story 14. I used to urinate in the vegetable patch. 6 weeks later, my parents came over for dinner and they complimented me on how good the vegetables tasted. Story 15. I went to an NFL game and tailgated with a few friends. One friend brought a new girl he had been seeing the first time I met her, and I was drunk and talking to both of them. I asked them if they were together, and evidently they had yet to have that conversation, but they ended up having it on the walk into the stadium. I was invited to their wedding 3 years later.